Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today for our Mussar class. We have missed a week of being together, and I just want to invite you to continue to walk on this path of rectifying and refining your character traits and understand that we are in it for the long haul. Today, we're talking about love. And as we look at our life, we sometimes we ask ourselves, what does love have to do with it, right? I know that in the secular world, there's an amazing song about that, but it's not exactly what Hashem is wanting us to uh, really look into and connect with that attribute. So, the attribute that Hashem wants us to connect with about love is actually compassion. So, let's just dive into this, shall we? Judaism in itself is actually about bringing us into that closeness with Hashem. Everything that we do as Jews should be about connecting with Hashem. As we study and perform mitzvot, all of these things are helping us to connect with Hashem. And why do we need to connect with Hashem? We have to develop a relationship. When it comes to love, there has to be a relationship there. And the Torah really commands us that we are to love others as we love ourselves, right? So we look at that and it's like, how is it that we can just love others as we love ourselves? And some of us may be asking yourself, well, actually, I don't even know if I love myself. So how can I love others like I love myself when I'm not really so happy with who I am in the first place? So let's look at that for a moment. Because what we need to understand is that there's a difference between loving and liking. So Hashem is saying, there may be some attributes about ourselves that we just really don't like. But yet we know that we love ourselves by our actions toward ourselves. So you can look at the things that you do, the way that you protect yourself, the way that we are thinking about ourselves really moment by moment. We're concerned about our next meal and what we're going to eat, and we think about that from meal to meal. We think about our comfort, whether we're too hot or we're too cold. We think about our financial situation. Do we need more finances? Do we have enough? Are we lacking in these areas? So everything that pertains to our life and existence here on this earth, we prove that we love ourselves by continually being concerned about everything that involves our life, right? Our health, our relationships, whether people like us, and just all these things that we're concerned about proves that we love ourselves. Now, is it true that there's things about ourselves that we dislike? Obviously, there are. And some of these things are real, and some of these things are not real. But if you perceive that there are things about you that you don't like, then actually that's a good thing, because then that means we have the opportunity to do something about it, to change whatever it is that we dislike about ourselves, to create that new nature within us so that we become the kind of person that we know we should be. You know, we are commanded to love God, and yet many of us may have issues with actualizing that. Do we really love God? We're commanded to love God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our resources. And then we ask ourselves, do I really love God? Do I really love Hashem with all of my heart, with all of my mind, and with all of my resources? And this question may be burning and burning within us. But in order to love Hashem, we have to have a relationship with Hashem. I was listening to a shore the other day about how you can kind of have a little check mark about different areas of your life to determine whether or not you really love Hashem. And one of the ways that you can gauge this, and your little barometer, is how you respond physically, where you actually feel something. One Hesed um, described it as, when a man puts on tefillin and he puts the box up around his head and he feels that box on his forehead. There's a feeling. He knows that feeling is that idea of connecting with Hashem, of having the name of Hashem on his head. And he literally feels that as he's wrapping tefillin on his arm and through his fingers, he literally feels the connection that he has with Hashem. And we can have that same feeling and understanding when we it was described like, if you're walking down the street and don't realize that you're getting ready to meet maybe an old friend that just happens to be going the same way or so forth, and suddenly you there, and it's like, wow, you're so intensely excited, you can't believe that of all the places in the world that the two of you would just happen to meet by happenstance there. And you're so excited, and that feeling of joy and excitement, and you give each other a big hug or so forth. That is a genuine feeling in the flesh. And this is the kind of feeling that we can have when we know that we're connecting moment by moment with Hashem. There's that feeling of joy, of excitement, of pleasure. And it's actually that feeling that is a physical feeling. We know that when we have, some of us maybe have the experience of having family reunions. Sometimes families are still keeping those attribute the like maybe a yearly get together, so forth, and that's such a wonderful thing if you have family that actually does get together once a year, so um, periodically for a reunion with one another. And, it's such a joy to be able to see a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or so, someone that maybe lives a long distance from you. And so, therefore, you really rarely ever see each other, but perhaps maybe once a year in some family reunion. And oh, the joy that you have, and how you just can sit for hours and kind of catch up on everything. But just the pleasure of seeing them again and being joined together in the relationship that maybe you had as children growing up. And maybe you talk about the things that you did as children, and just reliving your experiences together. Well, this is the kind of thing that we have to develop with Hashem. We have to have experiences with Hashem that we can look back on. And it's important as we are having this building this relationship with Hashem, that the things that we're experiencing is whether or not we were able to really trust Him in situations where we found ourselves and experienced this feeling of desperation and needing to just, praying and asking Hashem to help you in a situation. Maybe it was something that you just really, a situation that you really had to be delivered from. Maybe it was an extreme illness or something that brought terror and fear to your heart. And yet, as you connected with Hashem through these experiences, and He delivered us out of situations, then what happens is that we've learned to trust Him. And when you learn to trust someone, you learn to love them. And this is something that children develop with their parents. There's this, picture of a child who is, a parent has maybe stood them up on a little table, and the child is very young. Maybe they're just a couple years old, and you tell the child, just jump, I'm going to catch you, just jump, just, and you have your arms out, and the child is like, can I do this? Are they going to catch me? And suddenly they just leap out into the air, and and you catch that child, and you hold on to that child, and that begins to build trust. And that's how it is with Hashem. So sometimes when we find ourselves in situations where we know that the only thing that's going to get us any kind of help is we just have to put all of our faith, all of our trust in Hashem. And we just have to let go and let God. All right. I know that's it's a great saying, let go and let God, but that's what we have to do. Sometimes we have to just let go of these reins that we're holding on to, and we realize that it's slipping out of our fingers, and suddenly we're going to find ourselves airborne and in for a great fall. But this is where we just have to, like the trapeze artists, as we're swinging back and forth, and suddenly we realize that it's time to let go of one swing and reach out for the other one. And there's that trust. And with experience, we realize that when we let go of a situation and we turn our trust to Hashem and we grab hold of Hashem's hands, He is that eagle that swoops down underneath us and he bears us up in his wings. And we begin to trust Hashem. And as we begin to have these experiences, we're building that relationship with Hashem and we're learning to love Hashem. So, in order to really love Hashem with all of our heart, with all of our mind, and our resources, what resources do we have? Our resources are first and foremost the mitzvah, our service to Hashem. Service is our avodot, our service to Hashem. And this is why we were actually created, is to serve Hashem. And so this is the most important thing, is to be able to develop a relationship with Hashem so that we then can fulfill our purpose by serving Hashem. You know, if we're not close to Hashem, we don't have a relationship with Him, we don't even really know what our purpose is. So if you've been asking yourself, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why was I born? You can find it in the Torah. The Torah is Hashem written down, and is written down on paper so that we can read it, so that we can ingest it. It is our life. It is everything. And it is Hashem. As we are involving ourselves by learning and putting into our heart daily the Torah of God, we are putting Hashem in our heart. And as our heart is filled with Torah, it's beginning to be filled up with Hashem. And this is what enlightens our eyes, and it directs our path, because the Torah is a light unto our path. So as our path is being enlightened, we understand and begin to see our purpose. And then as we pursue our purpose, Hashem begins to help us build these attributes, and we become stronger and stronger in all of our character traits. And remember, we were all born with character traits that were basically our tools to complete our purpose and fulfill our purpose for being here. But each one of us have specific attributes that are different from someone else, which is why it's so important that each one of us search with all of our purpose and meaning and purpose, and purposefully search everywhere, search our hearts, search and find out from the Torah what is our purpose, what are the character traits that Hashem has put in us that we have to develop in order to fulfill the purpose that we are born for. So emotions, we're talking about emotions, feeling love. It's not just something that's nebulous out there, love, love, love. But it is something, but love is actually an emotion that we must feel. And where does that come from? It comes from within us. Remember, some of you may remember the story about the Good Samaritan, it's called. And it's a parable that Yeshua taught us about a Samaritan who was in the time of Yeshua was pretty much hated by everyone. And especially some of the the more stringent religious Torah scholars, especially the priest and so forth. And we see that there is someone that robbers have mugged him. He's bleeding, he's dying, and he's just lying by the road. And this road evidently was between Jerusalem and probably Jericho, because we see that priests are going back and forth along this road. So most likely this is the time when a lot of the priests were at that time living in Jericho. And so on this road, we have different levels of people that are going back and forth. Levels meaning, some that are spiritually high and some that are just more secular or so forth. But all of them we see continue to pass by this man who's dying along the road. And then there's one person that finally stops. And, we call him, or he's called, now we call this the Good Samaritan, right? But what we see is that it's not that this person was religious or such a Torah scholar, but what this man had was compassion. And so we're told that we are to love others as we love ourselves. And so what we see here is that love is about having compassion. So compassion is something that we have to pursue, that just doesn't come naturally. But as we involve ourselves in the study of Torah and we begin to actually perform a mitzvah, what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah are the commandments that we see in Torah. The commandments, different commandments, and all of them, these attributes are useful in serving HaShem for the purpose of finding the holy sparks and bringing light to them. And so compassion is something that will be birthed in us as we study Torah, because Torah is the essence of HaShem. And what we know about HaShem is that is compassion and mercy are his main attribute. Everything about Hashem begins with mercy and compassion. That is birthed out of this love. And out of love comes all of the other beautiful attributes of Hashem, all of the essence of everything that he is. And he's put these things within us, but we have to awaken in them. So how do we awaken compassion? How do we awaken this love that we're supposed to have? By getting with the Torah, by by building this relationship with Hashem. This is how we awakening love. So look at this in the situation that maybe some of us have found ourselves as we were developing a relationship with who we are now married to. So many of us that are listening today are probably married or are maybe perhaps going to soon be married. And what happens there in this situation is that you first develop a relationship. Yes, and we're not talking about this love at first sight, because there's a little debate about what that kind of love really is. um, we see and oh goodness, one of the things that we see about one of David's sons that went into such a wicked situation, and that is that it says in the Torah that he fell in love with his sister, right? But what we see that he began to pursue was really not love, but it was lust. And because it really begins with saying that he saw that she was so beautiful, so beautiful. So there's that lust of the eye that began to he became so infatuated with her that he began to lust for her. And eventually, all these terrible things happened between the two of them. And then immediately following, he hated her. So we see that it really wasn't love at all, was it? So we have to understand the difference between lusting for something or lusting after someone and real and true love. Love is about compassion. Love is about mercy. And as we build these relationships, then we begin to truly fall in love. And that's how it is with the husband and wife. First, you begin to build a relationship. And, sometimes I've heard so many stories that many times when you first meet who will later become your spouse, you may not even like that person, right? But for whatever reason, maybe it's someone that you've been working with or got put together in some project or whatever. But whatever the situation is, it as time evolved, maybe you didn't really like this person to begin with, or maybe there's just a really no feeling at all but whatsoever. But as you begin to be with this person day after day, you begin to build a relationship. As you begin to build a relationship, then feelings develop. And as the feelings develop, and you begin to see that HaShem is putting you together as a soulmate, as these feelings develop, then love begins to be birthed in your heart. But it all starts with building relationship. So it's so important that we have a real love for HaShem. And yes, there's this balance between an awe, that respect, and love. So sometimes the first thing that we need to um, develop with Hashem is just that awe, that fear of God. And this is, we're told by Solomon that the most important thing is the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So the fear of God comes from finding out who God is. And we see this in the Torah. In the beginning, God created. If we just start there and and begin to have some wisdom and some understanding and the belief and the trust that God, I am, is the one who created everything. Everything that is and everything that will be, everything that was, everything, it's all Hashem. That right there should put us on the path of awe and respect for the Creator Himself. And as we then understand that, if we can just get a glimpse of that in our heart, then we surely will stay on this path and begin to find out more and more and begin to understand who He actually is and how we are supposed to respect and honor Him. And then as we begin to study the Torah, we're actually getting close to the heart of God. And then His essence begins to be burning and birthed within us. And then we begin to have compassion for others. And this is where we begin to fulfill everything that God has created us to do. We find our purpose. It is about loving Hashem. And this love then helps us to love one another as we love ourselves. So remember that as we um, actually are doing what God has called us to do, we are obeying Hashem by performing a mitzvah. Sometimes we may not like what we're having to do, reaching out, going beyond ourselves to help someone by doing acts of kindness. But as we know, one act of kindness leads to another act of kindness. And perhaps there's someone that maybe right now you don't really like. Maybe this person that Hashem seems to be keeping you, putting in your path to help or have compassion for. Maybe perhaps you don't really like this person. There's just things that about this person that aggravates you to no end, and you see them coming and you'd rather just go the other way and pretend that you don't see them or recognize. But Hashem is wanting you to develop compassion for this person. So as we do acts of kindness, some kind of mitzvah that we need to do for this person, more and more we would develop a relationship of compassion for this person. And actually, at the end of it all, we probably will actually begin then to love this fellow Jew as we love ourselves. So I'll leave this with you today. And remember that kindness is a part of our nature. So it's there and we must develop it. So be kind to ourselves and understand that this feeling that we have for ourselves, where we're always thinking about ways that we can help ourselves feel better and look better, and pursuing things that are all about, fulfilling things that we want in our own desires, that these are attributes that we can actually turn outward. Instead of just thinking about ourselves 24/7, we can actually turn these attributes outward and begin to think about others and what they need and what will help them and what will strengthen them, encouraging them, loving them, and sharing the compassion that God has for us, for others. So I leave this with you today. Think about more and more how you can connect with Hashem, because as we connect with Hashem, we become more like him and begin to have that mirror image of him on us. So until we meet again, I pray that you will just work on the attribute of love, which takes the attribute of patience, and have patience with yourself. You can do it.